Well, thank you very much, Greg, and it's a real pleasure to be here at the Congress of Business again. And the message of Congress of Business is clear. That business, academia and community organisations can and will play a leadership role. And I think it's a huge privilege for the University of Glasgow to work with the Chamber of Commerce on this really important conference, which focuses, as you said, Greg, on climate change and what we have to do by 2030. Now, when I was here last year, and I think the year before as well, I talked about other aspects of the work that the university does around net zero, particularly the impact on, that we have through our estate, through the Gallant project that was mentioned by Derek a moment ago. I want to talk today, in the 10 minutes I've got before our Q&A, really about the impact of research and discovery and indeed innovation. These were two of the items mentioned, although I do agree that all of the above is probably the strictly correct answer. I want to talk to you particularly about some of the things that we do around there, the capacity that a university the size of Glasgow, which is one of the so-called group of Russell Group universities, this is basically the 24 UK universities that have the greatest research intensity, can have as part of that drive towards discovery. I won't go through this. This just gives you an idea of the size of the university. We're very proud to be one of the world's top 100 university. We're very proud to be the 12th university in the world in terms of its the Times Higher Impact rankings, which measure, as I explained last year, the impact on the Sustainable Development Goals, which of course is something which is at the heart of the challenges that we face, including climate change. What I want to talk about, as I said, today is largely research and discovery. This is a map of the Glasgow Riverside Innovation District, which is led by the University of Glasgow. And later today, my colleague, Dr. Susie Mitchell, will share more about this, so I'm not going to steal her thunder in any way. What I want you to just capture from this is that actually it's a complex ecosystem. It's about university assets, it's about businesses, and it's about key translation assets, and including infrastructure. You'll see there that the recent Govan-Partick Bridge has been essential in bringing together the north part of the Glasgow Riverside Innovation District with the south, bringing together that innovation ecosystem. GRID is the largest of Glasgow's innovation districts. It's a flagship priority of the Chamber. It represents a really ambitious, bold place-based innovation programme delivered in a tripartite partnership with Glasgow City Council, Glasgow City Region, and indeed our National Economic Development Agency, Scottish Enterprise. What's key to some of these things, as I said, is what we do in terms of discovery-based research. You'll see in the top right there, ARC and Keystone. These are two new buildings. The Advanced Research Centre has been open for 2 years now. It's one of the biggest interdisciplinary research buildings in the UK. It brings together around 600 researchers across themes, not in silos by subject area or by faculty. It brings together researchers across the main challenge areas, and it's a really exciting new experiment, which I think is working really well to drive innovation. The Keystone building, which is right opposite it, which is under construction at the moment, will house part of our engineering college, engineering school, and will, with the ARC, continue to drive innovation. Now, and these are the kind of assets that we've been helping to develop over time. We've invested around 1.8 billion. The Keystone and the ARC, I've mentioned. The Health Innovation Hub is being developed by our partners, Cadans, south of the river, and will house a lot of our spin-out work at the university. I'm going to skip this. I want to give you 4 different examples of the work that we do, and I'm going to focus on those examples that are linked to net zero. I'm going to mention 2 spin-out companies, and I'm going to mention 2 programs of research. And I think that this again highlights how commercialization is at the one end of what we do, but at the other end, that fundamental research is absolutely, really important to drive that. Chemify is probably one of the fastest growing spin-out companies, certainly in Scotland at the moment. It was born out of our labs in the Advanced Research Centre in the ARC. It has the potential to revolutionise digital chemistry, and essentially what it does, it brings together AI with chemistry and allows much more rapid discovery of molecules which are fundamental in areas like the pharmaceutical industry, also in the case of materials, etc. One of the really interesting things about this is, however, it also has a net zero component, has a sustainability component, because chemical industry is also one of the biggest generators of waste. It was last year I shared exciting news that Chemify had just done its 33 million Series A, which is probably one of the biggest Series A raises in the UK. It's currently raising its next one. But actually, in terms of employment for the city, it's now employs over 130 staff. It's about to open its first factory just to the north of us in Maryhill, again bringing jobs to some of the most deprived parts of Scotland. Not a standard example of net zero technology that comes from our fundamental research is Clyde Hydrogen. It's a spin-out which has essentially developed a new type of electrolyzer and which can deliver green hydrogen at higher scale and at lower cost than existing models. It's addressing one of the critical challenges around hydrogen production at the moment. And again, I think the significance of this area is underscored by the Scottish Government's 180 million investment in hydrogen and carbon capture technologies. These two examples I've mentioned, Clyde Hydrogen and Chemify, are just two examples of many more companies in this space. They've been fundamentally supported by programs which have been delivered by the UK government, by the Scottish government, and indeed working with Glasgow City Region in partnership through mechanisms such as the innovation accelerators in recent years, which are key. I'm going to then mention a couple of programs of research. I think this is a really important point, that collaboration really does matter here. And I'm going to return to this at the very end, because I think we need to do even more in terms of being collaborative across our ecosystem. Scotland Beyond Net Zero was an initiative that was started by the Universities of Edinburgh and Glasgow as Scotland's two biggest research-intensive universities. But it was an open model. It's not one designed to exclude anybody. And in fact, 13 of Scotland universities are now taking part. What we're doing is we're seed funding a lot of new initiatives around net zero. A good example, I think, of some of this partnership in action is a collaboration with our neighbours at the University of Strathclyde looking at electric wallpaper, which might be a really great solution in terms of heating up old tenement buildings in a way that is compatible with our net zero drive. Heating accounts for 37% of the UK's carbon emissions, and frankly, some of our existing building stock simply cannot be adapted using technologies such as heat pumps. This is why you need new initiatives around this. But this is a good example of Scotland coming together, facilitated by two of Scotland's, the two biggest research intensives in Scotland, but opening its door to pretty much everyone else. I want to mention one other, just before I finish. I don't have a slide on it, but it's essentially, it's our Centre for Virus Research, which again is based just north of here in Bearsden. Obviously, Centre for Virus Research, very fundamental research. It was key during the COVID pandemic. But again, as we deal with climate change and the need to adapt, it's monitoring issues such as viruses that jump from animal species to human species. So zoonotic infection is one of the biggest threats that we face. So climate change is not just about preventing climate change, it is also about adapting to it. And this is why fundamental research such as the Centre for Virus Research is so important. At the same time, they're doing basic research that will drive also new solutions, not only medical solutions, but also medtech solutions. I want to conclude simply with a couple of challenges before the Q&A. One of the challenges I think we face is to drive collaboration faster and harder still. One of the things that really strikes me as the UK begins to fully define its industrial strategy, it's of course had consultation around the Green Paper. It will require all of our players to come together, and none more than a city like Glasgow. If that industrial strategy is to translate to the growth mission that the UK government has set itself, frankly, it's the Tier 2 cities like Glasgow, like Manchester, like Liverpool, like the West Midlands city regions that are going to be key to this. And frankly, I think we could do even better in a city like Glasgow in terms of collaboration. If I look across at our neighbours like Manchester, I think we could achieve even more in that space. And I'm going to set out some of that even more in the next few weeks about how we could improve further. I don't think we have enough deep collaborations still in a city like Glasgow. The second is actually a challenge around the industrial strategy. The industrial strategy involves identifying key technologies, and we quite rightly look at clustering around some of those technologies and sectors. One of the points I've certainly made to UK government is that actually 21st century clustering is very different from 20th century clustering. When I speak to businesses around net zero technologies, it's much more about complementary technologies. So it's not just about saying, oh, the West Midlands should be about advanced manufacturing or Edinburgh should be about financial services. It's about trying to identify those complementary technologies that will sit well together. If I look at the work of the ARC, if I look at the work that happens in our other innovation buildings and assets that we have, you find people working in quantum working together with life scientists. You find people working in chemistry with people in AI. It doesn't make any sense to simply classify cities around individual sectors or individual technologies. And I think we need to get smarter around that. So those are my two challenges, Greg, as I conclude. And thank you very much for joining in COB, and delighted to be here, Greg.
Great. Thank you very much, Anton. Anton, you packed a huge amount into those brief remarks, everything from telling us about Chemify and the Clyde Hydrogen through to Scotland beyond net zero. This is a very important link between health and climate, particularly with your Centre for Viral Studies, and then your observations at the end about national industrial strategy, the role of second-tier cities, and the importance of, as it were, reinforcing clusters of science discovery, technology and innovation. Absolutely fantastic. You also told us about electric wallpaper, if I may say, and I think that sounds like a really interesting development. I'd love to know more about that. We've got 3 questions from the room, and we're going to go for them if we may. One person asked, this is an anonymous question, how can we harmonise the real or not or apparent disconnect between business and universities to work more on sustainability and net zero economy for everyone? Is there a perception that there's a disconnect? What do we do to overcome that?
Is my microphone working?
Yes,
okay,
is,
yeah, okay. That's a really good question, and partly because universities can be, from the outside, difficult to penetrate. For somebody who's inside, we know exactly how to bring ideas together, and as I said, we've been breaking silos internally, but it doesn't mean that there isn't a silo. The university as a whole can't be a silo for somebody from the outside. I think we're trying to do better around technology transfer, around knowledge exchange. We've certainly built up that area quite a bit at Glasgow. I know many other Scottish institutions have. I think we need to be better at essentially making it very clear what it is that we do on the outside. A lot of this is around seed corn funding. One of the big things we've done in GRID, and you'll hear more about this later, is to provide very small grants for members of the public, even community groups, to come and learn more about what we do in the university. But as I say, I don't want to steal Susie's thunder because she'll tell you more about that later. So there are mechanisms, I think, for doing that, and some of that doesn't cost a huge amount of money.
Great. Now, Mariana is asking us a slightly similar question, but from the other end of the telescope. Where do you think that university, government and business partnerships are failing or suboptimal in their impact on climate, and what needs to be done to really improve them or strengthen them?
That's a really great question. I suppose one of the issues is the quantum of investment. Are we putting in enough in order to make a difference? Now, of course, the fiscal position in the UK isn't simple. Even with the modified fiscal rules that the UK government introduced, that headroom is not infinite. I think we need to look at the level of investment that we need to put in, and the Climate Change Commission has made it clear that some of that investment is actually will produce returns pretty quickly. So I think we just need to look at the level of investment. I mentioned earlier that we need to make sure we're getting the structures right. The UK's success in the Horizon programs. We've gone in and are pretty successful in what are called mono-beneficiary programs, where single researchers put in things like the European Research Council. We're getting good grants there. We've lost the networks that we had built up over many years, so we're currently there. We've lost the networks that we had built up over many years, so we're currently trying to rebuild those. But absolutely, I think Horizon will help. One of the big questions, however, is, and a number of us have been talking about this recently, is that Europe is actually been a bit schizophrenic around the 10th framework program, the extent to which it needs to be based in discovery research. And I think this is a big debate. Fundamental research, frankly, as I said, is, I think, key to this. And it's interesting because after all those debates, we suddenly saw, of course, the European Commission President von der Leyen and President Macron saying science is important. So hopefully it's been...
One sentence answer to the question, how is the University of Glasgow helping young entrepreneurs, especially students and researchers, to establish their own enterprises?
So we're trying our very best to develop support for their spin-out programs. What we still probably need to do more of is around wider entrepreneurship programs. What we do at the moment tends to be, you can't universally access it. It tends to be focused on certain programs, whether it's through our business school or School of Computing Science, Engineering, etc. We're trying to roll out a more comprehensive program at the moment, but it's a really good question. I think the universities do need to scale that up, although given universities' financial situation at the moment, it's not easy because this is all additional activity that we need to put in place.
Great. Well, Anton, firstly, thank you from all of us for Glasgow University being the principal partner of COB. Ladies and gentlemen, Professor Sir Anton Muscatelli, thank you very much.